So let's get started. Thank you for joining us. Today is the 17th of November, obviously, and today we're going to talk about the Rating Readiness tool. We'll go over that in pretty good detail today. Along with that, we're going to tie in the Early Achievers Standards, which is why we have it as a handout for you today. And we have a couple of panelists with us this morning. And so if you're able to follow along, that would be great. If you have any of those documents, the Rating Readiness tool or the quality standards, it'd probably be helpful if you had a printed out version of it. You could take notes on it as we go through. So my name is Minette Mason. I am the QRIS Integration Specialist over here at DEL, and I'm going to be facilitating today's webinar. And then with us, we have Kathy Blair and Catherine Duffy. If you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be awesome.
Hi, my name is Kathy Blair, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for Eastern Washington. Part of my role is approving all the sites on the licensed child care pathway to be rated, and so I go through and look at their file supporting material and their rating readiness tool when I do that. And it has given me a lot of insight around how to support providers in being successful and likely getting the points that they're wanting to achieve.
And I'm Catherine Duffy. I am the Community Liaison Lead here at University of Washington with the SQL office. And basically what my job is to oversee all of the gals that we have on our Community Liaison team right now who will actually be coming out to visit each of you depending upon what region you live in. And what the community liaison will do is just help you hopefully answer some questions and take some of the mystery out of the data collection process and help you just have all little details in place prior to your data collection visit.
Very awesome. Well, on behalf of DEL, I do want to thank you ladies for joining us today. I think this will be really helpful for our hybrid participants as they get ready for rating and as they get ready for the visit with the community liaison if they haven't gotten one already. So what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to go over some Early Achievers quality standards. We're actually going to look at those standards right alongside with the Rating Readiness tool. Kathy has a lot of information for us as far as preparing that Rating Readiness tool. And then Catherine will talk about what happens with that RRT, with the community liaison visit, and then just maybe a little touch on what you can do in between that visit and data collection. And then we'll also, I have one slide at the end where we can kind of go over a few other items that are available for our participants, some support, some next steps that you guys can probably take advantage of because it's right there at your fingertips. So again, I just want to invite you to download those handouts if you haven't done so already. It'll be helpful to you. So first, let's talk about the Quality Rating and Improvement System Standards. So this is a document that's created by DEL, and that is pretty much the breakdown of all the points that you can get with your Early Achievers rating. So what's important about that document is it talks about each separate area and how much those points are worth in each different area. And it falls alongside with the Rating Readiness tool because those points kind of line up with what the Rating Readiness tool is asking for you to look at. It is also available online, and that's what you can kind of see down here in this box on our DEL website. If you click on Child Care and Preschool Options, Early Achievers, and then it's on our Early Achievers Resources and Templates page as well. And this is what the document looks like. So throughout the presentation, you'll notice that I've taken screenshots of different quality standard areas, and we're going to be referencing those standards along with that RRT. So if you have that available, it would be great for you to have as a note taker. And pretty much what it is an 8-page document, and it breaks down all the point values. So this is on page 3 where it kind of summarizes those points. But Kathy, can you help us understand how this relates to the RRT?
Sure. So starting on number 12 of the RRT, it follows the same sequence of the quality standards laid out on this 8-page document that's pictured on this slide. The RRT is organized in two parts, with a first part, numbers 1 through 11, focus on the things the data collectors need organized to begin their data collection, and Catherine will be speaking more to this. The quality standards used to determine points begins actually on number 12 of the RRT and goes through number 38. If you have the quality standard document shown on this slide at your fingertips, you can turn to the next page, page 4, and you'll see how the 10 points are broken down for child outcomes. And then you'll also notice that the quality standards of those child outcomes is in the same sequence that you're going to see on the RRT.
So one thing I want to make mention is there is also an interactive rating readiness tool that's out there. For the purpose of today's webinar, we're going to be looking at the traditional rating readiness tool, or the RRT. So you're not required to use the interactive readiness tool, but there are some benefits to this version. And Kathy and Catherine, would you mind sharing your experiences with the interactive version of the rating readiness tool?
Sure, this is Kathy. I'll go first. This is a brand new tool that just became available, so I actually haven't personally had the opportunity to see it used with providers. However, it does offer more clarity than the older RRT about how points are awarded with each quality standard. Just by reviewing this document side by side with the older RRT will offer you insight, even if you decide to keep using the older version. But the newer one definitely gives a little bit more insight and is broken up differently to help you understand how important certain aspects are for achieving the point or points that you're wanting.
This is Catherine. The original rating readiness tool and the companion guide that went along with it were a great way for us to start doing the Early Achievers program. But this interactive rating readiness tool and the guide that goes along with it is much more specific. Basically, one-to-one, they really coincide. Whatever it is that is being looked at, number 1 on the interactive rating readiness tool, it will align with number 1 on the guide and will help the provider just have that much more specificity around what it is that is being looked for each of those components. And it's really it gives the provider an opportunity to kind of have like a worksheet, honestly, to look through and decide, well, if I opt into this one and I opt into that one, it will give a sense of how many points could you possibly be accumulating as you opt in or opt out to the different components. So it's meant as a nice tool for preparation, and then just to give the provider a good idea of what they might anticipate being able to get as a score.
Awesome. So now that we know how the quality standards fit in, let's get started with that rating readiness tool. You'll notice on the screen that I've taken a statement on the bottom. It comes from page 3, actually, of the RRT, and it talks about the file of supporting materials. Kathy, can you help us understand why a facility's file of supporting materials will be relevant to the rating readiness tool?
Yes, the file of supporting material is important in that it really aligns with the rating readiness tool. So as you're, the file of supporting material can be a binder or a file box, and then you tab it out so that it aligns with the numbers of the rating readiness tool. And in that, you would put your evidence or location in the, here you go. On this slide, you can see the location of the part there that is being circled. And in that, you can put your file of supporting material as a location for evidence, or in your file of supporting material, you can also write a paragraph or two that helps you really tell your story of how you, the process that you have in order to really help the data collectors be able to identify your pathway in how you're aligning to maximize your opportunity to get the points that are in the readiness tool guide. And this will help you as you organize it so that the data collectors can follow clearly your pathway. They also, when they read your description of how you do screenings, for example, and what that process looks like, it helps them know where they're looking to find evidence for the screenings and understand what it is they're looking for.
Great, thanks, Kathy. So I went ahead and put this screenshot up there because it seems to be a common question that I've gotten from the field. And that question is, when do I sign the rating readiness tool? Catherine, could you help us understand these different blocks that we see here and when the community liaison would sign, as well as the QRIS contact?
Sure. Yeah, this is definitely not intuitive, and I agree with you. There's a lot of question around this. Basically, what providers need to have filled out prior to the community liaison visit, and also so before the data collection visit as well, is those 6 boxes up at the top left of that rating readiness tool cover page. And that includes, they're starting with the facility name, and if you would list it exactly as it is in Merit, even though that might irritate you because you like it said a different way or whatever, that just helps us be able to find your information just at the touch of a button, which is really helpful. Then the primary QRIS contact name, whoever that is at your particular site, the region that you live in. Are you in King County? Are you in Southwest? Are you in Eastern? Then right next to region, the date of application for evaluation. What was the date that your application was approved for data collection? The technical assistant specialist and the regional coordinator boxes, typically we've been working with Kathy and her CCA team, and so there's people who have those titles. As far as DEL goes, I'm not sure, Minette, you can maybe speak to that as well. But other than that, those boxes that we just covered, everything else is going to be filled out either during the community liaison visit or during the data collection visit. So when one of our community liaisons come, you'll see in the boxes up at the top, but over to the right, the community liaison has a name and the CL signature and date there. And those, yeah, all those UW boxes that are highlighted in blue are ones that the community liaison will fill out. And we've always made it a joke that community liaisons have 2 boxes, so there must be something really special. We have to print our name in one and sign in the other. There you go. Then there's the official evaluation period. That's basically the cohort. Oftentimes, I think you will probably all be in the ECAP cohort. So anyway, the community liaison would write that there. Then this box at the bottom of that large top box there that says information about items not in place during data collection visit, that also has a little gray UW only sign on it. And that is in the event that the data collector is going through your file of supporting materials, using your rating readiness tool as a guide, and somehow something wasn't there and they're not, exactly sure what the scoop was, and so they talked with you about it, and maybe you told them, oh yeah, actually we decided not to do that, or we ended up not having any materials in that particular component. Then the data collector just makes a notation there for themselves, and you'll see that, and you'll kind of agree that, oh yeah, that's what the situation was. And then right below that is when you will both sign and date the cover of the rating readiness tool, and the data collector will take a picture of it, as will the community liaison during their visit. It's just a receipt for our office saying that we were there, because we don't take any of your materials with us. So it's, yeah, just a visual receipt.
Okay. Thanks, Catherine. I hope that helps to better understand how this works during a community liaison visit and pretty much how to be prepared for that visit before they arrive. So we're going to move along with the rating readiness tool. And this is another question that comes up. We'll notice in this area that some of these blocks here are gray. And this is starting on page 6. Catherine, can you help explain what this means?
Sure. The grayed out boxes on the rating readiness tool means that a program doesn't have the option of opting out of that particular component. That's why it's all of those gray boxes are under the opt-out heading. These are all things that need to be in place in order for the data collection visit to happen. And that's one of the things that the community liaison will definitely double check with you when they're there at your program. And like Kathy explained earlier really well, that little location box that you've got over to the right side of this rating readiness tool is so going to help the data collectors expedite their time there. Because really the hope is that in their process they will interrupt you as little as possible. And the more information that you can tell them about where your files are kept or your information is really appreciated and helpful. So just briefly to go through these different components, number 1 just talks about where you keep your file of supporting materials. Typically, or your RRT, your file of supporting materials, and typically you're going to keep this RRT in the front of your file of supporting materials because it's pretty much the guide to help the data collectors get through it. Some folks keep it in their office or under their desk or in the library, whichever. You can just delineate that. Then number 2 is the map of your facility. Fill that out and let the data collector know where they're going to be able to find your different files. Maybe mark on it where the bathroom is. You know, those kinds of things that you think would help them in their time of visiting your program. Then number 3, copies of all signed parent consent forms organized by classroom. You're going to have consent forms that parents need to sign because the data collectors are going to be looking in their children's files. Some parents don't like that, and even if they don't like it, we still need a consent form to be signed that says, no, I don't want my child's file to be looked at. And all of that's delineated very clearly on the consent forms for you to use. Then when those forms are all filled out per classroom, organize them per classroom for the data collector. It just, again, totally expedites their process. And whichever parents didn't want their children's files to be looked at, there's another component a little bit later where all of those names of those children will be listed for the data collectors so that they will definitely not pick out that child's file and look at it. Number 4 is providing a copy of your parent handbook, your staff handbook, any other relevant policy documents that you want the data collectors to see that is going to give a really nice explanation of who you are, what your policies and practices are. And again, all of this, be sure and let us know in that file of supporting materials location over on the right. Let us know exactly where that's being found. Even if you're just saying see tab 4 for tab 4, if everything's in your file of supporting materials, let the data collector know that. It just makes it clear for them. Number 5 is teacher schedules. That's just basically, what are the teacher's schedules throughout your center or your program. Number 6 is a location of child records that track the date of enrollment and the birth date of each child in the program. What the data collectors like for this component is if you can provide them with information about that per classroom, both the date of enrollment and the birth date of each child, but they don't need the child's name whatsoever. It's just about the population in each of the classrooms. And actually the community liaison wants to see that as well, because there's some classrooms where we need to write down every birth date just because it's a classroom where, is this going to be in Itters or is this going to be in Eckers? And we need to share that information with our scheduler so that she can figure out which one of the assessment tools is the right one to use for that particular classroom. So the community liaison will also be taking a peek at that very carefully when she's looking through your file of supporting materials. And you can update that. Oftentimes, if you have your records electronically, the data collectors come, you can update that for them if possible, or just let them know when the last time was that you had the availability to update that, and whatever version you have in your file of supporting materials. Then number 7 is just a copy of all the classroom schedules. 8 is parent contact information for families that volunteer to participate in an interview. Those parents that want to do that, they'll be filling that out on the consent form. And basically what we do is we randomize per classroom however many parents have responded and said they would be interested in that interview. It takes about 15 minutes. We do it on the phone or email, depending on what the parent has specified as their preference. And we basically ask them about their experience at your program. Just a lot of different questions that later on serve to confirm for the data collectors what they've seen elsewhere, what they've heard from teacher interviews, what they've heard from the director interview, and those things I'll talk about in a second as well. Then number 9 is the list of children whose files should not be considered. That's what we were talking about. That's just a really safe, specific place for you to put the names of those children, so the data collectors are careful about that. 10 is provide information about how staff were notified of facility participation in early achievers. That sometimes I just see, you can see over on the right side, this one just says notes. Oftentimes the provider will just write a note in there and say, we talked about this at a staff meeting on such and such a date, and maybe they'll have the sign-in sheet of that particular staff meeting in their file of supporting materials. Or we just see a variety of different things along those lines, but just show us how you were able to notify your staff about participation. And then number 11 is providers are able to give up 15 minutes on the day of observation for teachers in selected classrooms to be interviewed, and then an additional 30 minutes for data collectors to be able to interview the teachers as well. The particular teachers that we're talking about having to be ready for an interview are the teachers in whose classroom the environment rating scale assessment is conducted. And those classrooms are all randomly selected during the scheduling process. At the end of the 3-hour environment rating scale assessment, there's going to be a need for the data collector to ask some clarifying questions about all of those different indicators as they're completing the score for the environment rating scale. That question and answer time with the teacher usually takes like 10 or 15 minutes, just depending. And it needs to happen the same day as the ERS assessment so that everything's fresh in both the data collector's mind as well as the teacher's mind. Then those same teachers are also asked to answer 30 minutes worth of just general questions about their experiences in the classroom, the policies of the program, just different questions where they have opportunities to tell about their experience at the program. And we usually say that it'll take 30 minutes. I mean, sometimes there's teachers who like to tell more stories, so it could take a little bit longer. But all of that information is something that goes into the same thing that I said earlier about the parent interviews. It really helps to just clarify and confirm and underline different things that are happening in the program that are being looked at maybe from a document perspective on the other parts of the rating readiness tool. But in this case, we get to hear about it and have it explained to us.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine. I think that was really helpful. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind on my slides. I'm trying to track the questions that are coming in as well. We actually did get a question. I think we'll take a moment and answer at least one of them. Somebody's asking, Mary McDonald's asking, for number 6 right here, she says, did I understand to make a list each child's birthday and enrollment date, but should this list contain their name?
No. In fact, the data collectors prefer that it doesn't. If it does, Mary, then it does. But no, they don't need the child's names at all.
Okay. Great. Okay, so let's get into the different quality standard areas. The first area is child outcomes, and that's where you would earn the points for developmental screenings. And this is what Kathy kind of mentioned a little earlier. Did you want to talk about this, Kathy?
Sure. So the developmental screenings okay. So I'm just getting used to the slides and how you're doing them. This screening quality standard point is broken up actually in 2 areas on the Rating Readiness tool. The Rating Readiness tool, next to number 12, a person would write where the data collector is going to find the screening on each child, and also write the FSM or tab number 12. And the reason why you would write FSM or tab number 12 is because there are other requirements for this point that aren't spelled out in the FSM tool or the Interactive Rating Readiness Tool Guide. A written paragraph or 2 about how you meet those expectations, where evidence is, will be important to help you be more successful in getting this point. The same recommendation is true for number 13 on the RRT. It's important to tell your story and tell because data collectors won't be sitting across the table from the director or from the coach when they're reviewing the FSM, and they won't be asking questions. So the data collector must be able to follow the process and evidence without assistance. And then some things to keep in mind is remember that this point requires 100% of all children that have been enrolled longer than 90 days have screenings, that 100% of all children have evidence of it being shared with parents, and that 100% of the time screening information is shared with parents within 30 days of the screening being completed. Lots of timelines and lots of 100% expectations. It does make this point a little bit challenging to get. If attempts are made to share information with parents and they're not responsive, you can document those attempts as well, and then that's fine. And lastly, this point also requires information that is shared with parents about developmental services for children where the screening flagged a developmental concern. So as you can see, when you look at number 12 and 13 and you just read it and look at it at the RRT, it seems pretty simple, but when you actually look deeper into the FSM tool or the Rating Readiness, the Interactive Rating Readiness Tool Guide, you'll notice many things that are required in order to get this 1 point. So I just can't stress enough how important it is to use those other tools.
Okay, and then again, those tools, the FSM tool is available as a handout on this webinar. So if you wanted to download that and take a quick peek at that, you definitely can. So another handout that's available actually is the one-pager about the Lena device, which it's mentioned here on item 14 of the Rating Readiness tool. Catherine, can you kind of explain to us what the Lena device is and how that fits into rating?
Sure, yeah, and thank you for including the one-pager for everybody to be able to take a look at and get a little snapshot of sort of what the device looks like. It's basically worn by the lead teacher in the classrooms where the environment rating scale is conducted. So as I mentioned earlier, that same room where all the interviews are done by that same teacher, that's the same room where this Lena will be worn. And it is a free point because the information that is gathered from the device is actually helping the sequel office know how much language is used in classrooms so that we can support the development of a language-rich environment. through teacher-child interaction. So all of this data is basically going to help figure out what is the threshold, what is the typical teacher-child interaction norm. The device calculates both the number of words spoken by the adults and the children, and it also calculates the number of back and forth conversational turns between teachers and children. So it's very much about counting things. It isn't about listening to how somebody speaks or if they have and are using proper English or anything like that. It's very much just a counting device.
Okay, we're just going to move along. So another area in the Reading Readiness Tool, another quality standard area that falls under child outcomes is the ongoing assessments. Kathy, can you help us understand a little bit about this section?
Yeah, so what I'll do is just kind of highlight some things that are really important to keep in mind with each one of these quality standards that we're going to go through. So number 15, ongoing assessment. It's important that this includes both formal and informal assessment. So the TSG, of course, is formal. Informal can be a child's portfolio, but there are other examples listed in the FSM tool or the Interactive Rating Readiness Tool Guide. That 100% of children have both formal and informal assessments, and information is collected on children 3 times a year. Results are shared with all the families 100% of the time. And again, if a parent isn't responsive to meeting and talking, then that just needs to be documented that there was a process for them to do that if they wanted to. And lastly, ongoing assessment information is used to individualize instruction is also part of this point as well. For evidence of shared individualized child data with parents, number 16, is data shared with families at least 3 times a year for 100% of children enrolled. And you might say yes to this question, but your evidence needs to prove it. So they're always looking at evidence to confirm what it is that you're opting in for. Number 17, evidence of family engagement and data sharing. This is important that practice match policy, and this is what is looked at here. And how the facility involves families in decision making regarding a child's transition. There's really a heavy emphasis on kindergarten transition for this point, and of course you guys have the ECAP performance standards are very heavy into this, and I'm sure that this is something that as you move through the Reading Readiness tool, you'll see that you probably already have this criteria met quite easily. Okay.
So another area. Go ahead, Kathy.
No.
Go ahead.
Well, so I kind of rushed. I know Manette was going to ask a little bit about creative curriculum, teaching strategies, and how it relates. So I want to talk a little bit about that and go through these different quality standards. Number 18 is the use of the WOD-Kids assessment tool, and this is referring really to teaching strategies gold and not creative curriculum. However, we all know that they are a companion to each other, but if you use TSG, which I think all of the programs do that are on this webinar, then you do not need to fill out the WOD-Kids alignment tool. So that's a good thing. That's one less thing that needs to happen. However, there are other pieces to number 18, so again, refer to the FSM tool or the Interactive Rating Readiness Tool Guide to make sure you have evidence of the other requirements for this point. Number 19, the documentation that teachers are trained and reliable. This is talking about the certificates from the online training for TSG reliability, and anyone who is responsible for assessing children with TSG must have evidence that they are reliable. So be sure you list in your FSM who assesses children so that data collectors know, and then they know to look for the documentation that they've had that reliability training. And again, am I right, Manette, that everybody is using TSG that would be on this webinar?
I wouldn't say that everybody is. I know a good portion of ECAP programs are using it, but when I was in ECAP, for example, we had just started using it maybe a couple of years ago, where some programs may not have gotten into that yet.
Okay.
So
Well
hit or
then,
miss.
okay. So any program that's not using Teaching Strategies Gold for an assessment, whatever assessment they're using and whatever training is required around that assessment is what the facility would have to have proof of. So every assessment will have their own criteria, and that's what the data collectors are looking for that is met for those that do the assessments with the children. Individualized instruction for all children. An example of this can be ongoing lesson plans with children's initials next to appropriate learning activities that align with the assessment information, but it doesn't have to be this example. Evidence of any ongoing practice of individualized instruction is fine. The online TSG program is a great tool to use, obviously, for individualized instruction. It's pretty amazing in that way. And then number 21, periodic review and use of child assessment data for continuous program improvements. Again, if you're using the online TSG program, it is really a tremendous help when looking at continuous improvements. So number 20 is really focused on individual instruction, but number 21 is focused on group patterns or behaviors in writing group goals or action plans. So again, if a program isn't using Teaching Strategies Gold, that's fine. It's using whatever assessment information, both informal and formal, to really identify group patterns and behaviors. And again, looking at the Rating Readiness tool or the Interactive Rating Readiness Tool Guide, you'll get a lot more information about this particular item.
So before we move on to the next area of quality standards, Kathy, there's a question that came in regarding PSG, and they haven't been using it very long. So if you have not been using PSG for very long, what do you recommend to those facilities as far as documentation for these different areas here?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You just need to have a start date, and then that start date needs to show from that start date on that you're meeting the criteria. So again, 100% of kids then would be assessed at that start date. So if right now you're kind of hit and miss on some of the specific criteria around the quality standards, you can put a start date to say, okay, here's now where we're starting to come in alignment with the expectations of early achievers, and this is from this day forward you're going to find the evidence that aligns with these expectations. That's what we've been doing for all the licensed child care pathway providers, because this is actually quite common. Catherine, I don't know if you want to speak to this a little bit more.
No, I think what you've said is good. It's I think it's just about documenting and, like you said, having that start date and doing the best that they can to come into alignment with what these different standards are. And I think just being straight up honest about it, and because the data collectors will see whatever it is that is or isn't there. And maybe some of these things are just some of the components that programs will continue to work and improve at as a result of having it just highlighted through this process.
Great. Well, thanks for clarifying that. So let's move on. The next area, quality standard area, talks about professional development and training. And you can kind of see on this slide, there's really not a whole lot here. What I can say to this is what happens when you submit a request for on-site evaluation is Merit takes a snapshot of the professional development of those employees that you have staffed at your facility, at your site. And so that's pretty much where these points would come from, is what it looks like when you submit that request. Kathy, do you have anything else? Do you ever see anything listed in this area of notes or anything like that?
No, we tend to just leave it blank because it really is all about what's based in merit.
Okay. So the next area is curriculum and staff support.
So number 23, it talks about the curriculum profile, And in both the FSM tool and the Interactive Rating Readiness Tool Guide, there are specific requirements that must be included for the curriculum philosophy. And it might be a good idea to highlight those in your curriculum philosophy and put it in your FSM so the data collectors can really easily see that you've met that criteria. Now for number 24, 25, and 26, these three, it'll be important to meet with your ECAP specialist and get some support around these three and how to meet these requirements. The one thing that I will point out for especially the 25 and 26 around training is that there is a process in place for any new lead teaching staff that within 30 days they have that training requirement met. That is important to for these points here for 25 and 26.
This is also another area, if I could just point out, this is also another area that's addressed in your ECAP performance standards. And I'm not sure what section it is, but it talks about the alignment with Washington State Early Learning Guidelines and all that good stuff. So I would probably also refer to what your performance standards say in this area as well.
Okay, for 27 through 29, we'll look at 27 first, ongoing mentoring of teaching staff. And there are 3 points total possible for this section, and to achieve all 3 points, you need 1 year of monthly mentoring evidence for all lead staff. And again, looking at your FSM tool or your Interactive Rating Readiness Tool Guide for more information. The evidence can also come from your coach support with the lead teachers, and that can help that evidence you would include in your FSM or in whatever area you're collecting evidence for ongoing mentoring. All these 3 points can be separated as well. It's not like you either get 3 points or you don't. So again, looking at your resources, you're going to see how you can achieve 1 point, how you can achieve 2 points, and just know that that 3 points is 12 months of evidence. For dedicated time for teaching staff, this includes lesson planning time outside the classroom with co-teachers planning together. It cannot just be lead teachers. For 29, dedicated time for teaching staff to engage in reflective practice. This is worth 2 points, and again, to get both points, they're needing to see 12 months of evidence for all lead teaching staff. And again, looking at your resources that you have, the SFM tool and the Interactive Rating Readiness Tool Guide for more information around this.
So the next area would be family engagement and partnership.
Number 30.
Do you want to go over this a little bit? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Number 30, complete modified strengthening family self-assessment. Many times programs forget strategy 8, health literacy section, the health literacy section. So make sure that that's included with your strengthening family assessment. Number 31, a plan of action based on strengthening family self-assessment. The plan of action form does not have a date, a place to write a date when it was written. So this is really important that you actually write a date at the top of the form of when the action plan was written. And it's important for number 32 because in number 32 talks about providing evidence of continuous feedback and improvement, and part of this point is achieving a goal within 6 months or less of the time it was written. So the only way they can determine that 6 months or less is by seeing that date of when it was written. In addition, there needs to be some evidence the goal or action plan was accomplished, plus reflection notes on how it went. So if the goal was not successful, then reflection of what you would do different next time is important here, or maybe you're adding new action plan goals because it was not successful and you know that in order for it to be successful, there's some other steps that need to be put into place. And again, you would just refer back to the FSM tool, the Interactive Rating Readiness Tool Guide, for more information around this. Number 33 is have a parenting support and education program in place. There are some examples on this slide that you can see listed of approved education programs. If you're not sure of if you have a parenting program that is approved or not, it would be important to talk to your ECAP specialist or Minette around that, and they can find out. We do know that Love and Logic and Circle of Security are not approved, and I know sometimes those are used. For number 34, provide information about community-based programs. This is a pretty quality standard is pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure the resources are in a language your families are most fluent in. Evidence of transition plans policies number 35 and number 36 both. I'm not going to, I really don't have any big pointers. For number 35, there are several specific policies that are needed. And again, it's just referring back to those two tools that I've mentioned over and over, and FSM tool and interactive rating readiness tool guide to give you the support here in both these two areas.
And so I can also add to this just my background in ECAP, but again in the performance standards, it does talk about a transition, having a plan for transition into kindergarten. I can just speak to my experience on this, and one of the things that we did is have one of our family nights, our monthly family nights. It was geared strictly towards that kindergarten transition, and so some of the practice that we had in place is we would have kindergarten teachers come and meet with the parents and answer questions. So again, it would probably be good to refer back to your ECAP performance standards and then just being able to speak to how you carry out those standards in your program.
So lastly, we have number 37 and 38. Number 37 is provide additional information about access to electronic materials. This could be Facebook, could be a website, it could be the TSG program, really anything that is electronic that you think would help support your evidence for the data collectors to look at, you would list that here. Number 38, this is additional materials you would like considered. So maybe you have newsletters, maybe you have pictures, just anything that you think, again, might help in the evidence of some of these other pieces that we've gone through and talked about in quality standards, anything that would support those. If you wanted to list it here, you would be able to do that and list the location, of course.
Yeah, we've
Go ahead, Catherine.
We've usually just encouraged providers in this particular section, like Kathy was saying, just to note the location, as we have been saying all along, of any of these additional materials. And sometimes providers maybe have like even a different binder that they wanted to show the data collectors or have them look through about X, Y, or Z component. If any of that sort of thing exists that the providers feel is going to be helpful for them, we just would also encourage them to just get that out when they have the data collector doing the records review. They'll look at the rating readiness tool and the file so that everything's available for them as much as possible in that place where they're going to be looking through all the materials. On another note, before we move off of this slide, one thing I've realized as we've been going through this is we didn't actually talk about or delineate on a slide to put a check or an X into either the in place or the opt-out box for each of these components. But that is so important for the provider to have accomplished, like where Minette is moving her mouse around right now. Because when the community liaison comes out and looks at your rating readiness tool, it means it should be completed, and for it to be completed, there should be an X or a check in one or the other of those boxes for each component of your rating readiness tool.
Thanks, Catherine. I think that was a really good point to point out here. And I do apologize because I took screenshots of the RRT, and so you can't see the opt-in or the opt-out above these columns here. But yeah, absolutely, that's definitely what we need to make sure we pointed out. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Catherine. Thank you. So we've gone over the rating readiness tool, all items that's covered in there. And Kathy, you've done a great job giving us some insight into preparing that. So what I want to recommend is just to review those handouts that were provided. The idea of it is to help you gauge how prepared you are for both the community liaison and the data collection visit. Do you have anything you want to add, Catherine?
I would just say, I would underline what Kathy has said throughout, and that is if the providers have already completed the rating readiness tool, that is the document that we're seeing here, and they have time to look at and go through the interactive rating readiness tool and compare the two, I think it would be really, really helpful. It'll just fill in some blanks. It is not at all a requirement at all, but it could just be yet the next step after a webinar like this to be able to answer some more questions or come up with some other ideas of how different components could be fulfilled in the rating readiness tool.
Okay. And I think before we go over the next steps, there's a couple questions that came in. One of them relates to number 16 on the RRT, and I'm just going to flip back to it. And number 16 says evidence of shared individualized child data with parents. And the question is, for our child care children in hybrid sites, oh, actually we answered that question. I apologize. I'm looking at number 27 is what I'm looking at. And so number 27 talks about ongoing mentoring of teaching staff to support improvement in curriculum and teacher-child interactions. And so the question is, do they need a full year of evidence or just evidence from this school year?
So when you look at the FSM tool or the guide to the interactive rating readiness tool, you'll see how the points are broken down. And for one point, it'll say, like, I think a couple of examples of the during the year of mentoring, and I think for 2 points it's more than that. I don't have it right in front of me, but and then for the 3 points, it is wanting 12 months worth of evidence. So it's okay. We have a lot of level 4s in Eastern Washington in the licensed child care pathway, and they don't get all the points in the quality standards, and they get most of them, but they don't get all of them. And so some of these quality standards are really challenging. Where they end up getting their points for level 4 is not only in the majority of the quality standards, but again, the class. Try and really work hard to get 40 points in class. That will be a big help. So I don't know if I hope that answers your question, but just refer to the resources, and I think you'll get that question answered for you there.
Okay. And then something a little bit related to this same section, number 28 talks about dedicated time for teaching staff, planning time on a weekly basis, and the question is, does this refer to more than just the lead teacher? What do you recommend there, Kathy?
Yeah, it's co-teachers. So if you have an assistant teacher working with a lead, those 2 teachers need to have a minimum of an hour a week of lesson planning together. Outside of, they can't be included in ratio. So co-teachers is part of this quality standard, lesson planning together.
Okay. And I do want to add, my experience with when I when our site got rated anyway. That was a question that actually came up during the interview with the teachers, with the lead teacher, and that's pretty much what they asked is, what kind of planning do you and your teacher have together as far as setting up a classroom or curriculum or anything like that. So hopefully that helps to answer that question as well. And then another question, it kind of goes back a little bit before this area, and it's kind of going back to the birthdays. But are the data collectors looking for a full list of birthdays, or do they just want the oldest and the youngest? I don't know if you have the answer to that, Catherine.
Yeah, they definitely want the oldest and the youngest birthdays in each classroom, absolutely, every classroom. But in some classrooms, they will need all of the birthdays because of the ages of the children that might span both ITER's and ECHR's guidelines. And so what we do is we put the children's birthdays into an Excel spreadsheet that then when the scheduler puts in the date that the data collection visit is going to happen, those birthdays will adjust to let her know how old each of those children are in months and days. I mean, it's really specific, so that she's sure to have the data collectors use the correct assessment for the age of the majority of the children in that room.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to move on. We've got about 3 minutes. Catherine, do you want to talk a little bit about preparing for that community liaison visit?
Sure, yeah, this is just some real basics here, just to anticipate that the visit will be 2 or 3 hours, depending on how much information you have to share and how many stories you tell to the community liaison. Be sure, as we've talked about, to have the Rating Readiness Tool cover page completed and uploaded to WELS by your pre-K specialist or whoever it is that's going to be uploading that for you. Then components 1 through 11 we've already reviewed together, but just the close attention to the consent forms being all signed. Make sure that each of the boxes that needed to be checked are checked, that the parents actually signed them, and that if there is parent interview information, that it's ready for the community liaison. She will actually take that with her if that's comfortable for you, because she's the one who's going to be making those parent interview phone calls or emails. The other data collectors are not. So just having those put together is wonderful, and that's consent forms is number 3, and the parent interview information is number 8 component. Then this is not a component on this rating readiness tool, but it is a new one on the IRRT, and that is having already decided what your blockout dates are. Each program gets only 2 blockout dates per month, other than whatever school closures are on your calendar already. And those are things that need to be shared with the community liaison and actually emailed to her at the end of the visit or during the visit, so that she can then forward that to the scheduler, who then uses that information to put you on the data collection calendar. And number 6 component from the Rating Readiness Tool is the children's birth date and date of enrollment delineated, which we've talked about. So then, as I mentioned when we had that little bit of visual there, being sure that you've put some kind of a mark in opt-in or opt-out for each of the 38 components of the Rating Readiness Tool, because it's really important for providers to know that the community liaison cannot make any changes to any of those markings. They have to be there in black and white already, because that's just not our piece. Everything else needs to be already marked and in place before we come out. The director interview we haven't touched on. The director interview is actually the first piece of collected data, and that's going to happen during the community liaison visit. Similar questions in the to the teacher interview will be asked of the director. Just tell me about your program. What are your policies in this way, that way? How do you train staff? I mean, just a variety of things asked, and it can take from 15 minutes to a half an hour, again, just depending. And then just continuing to keep adding information into your file of supporting materials after the community liaison visit. What's most important is when we see the Rating Readiness Tool during our visit, just have it all filled out. But if you don't have things in your file of supporting materials yet that are evidences for the data collectors, that's okay. Just put them in the meantime until the data collection visit actually occurs.
All right. So it looks like we're out of time. I'll just kind of show you guys the last slide here. And this slide pretty much just talks about things that you can do to prepare for that data collection in between the community liaison visit, which Catherine did a really good job talking about. The only other thing that I wanted to add is that we do have an outreach toolkit, and it is found on our DEL website. So if you peruse through del.wa.gov, these outreach documents and tools just kind of gives a little bit more information if you have parents who might be wondering about early achievers or anything like that. If you and your staff want to just go over any of that information, it just kind of helps to explain the process a little bit. So with that note, if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to me. There's my email address and my phone number. You can also email the QRIS inbox, as I do sometimes. I'm not available at my desk. But if there's anything else, I hope this was helpful for you. And Kathy and Catherine, again, I appreciate your time and the efforts that you guys put forth towards early achievers and the help that you've given to our hybrid participants today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.